Everyone's seen them, those adorable puppies for sale online. But before you go adding a companion animal to your family, you should know the law and the risk of purchasing one in Virginia, where the burden falls on the consumer when things go wrong. I'm William Johnson, and this is The Burden. Hello everyone. I'd like to start a new conversation about the undue burdens that fall on consumers when defrauded by a seller of companion animals in the state of Virginia, and to offer a solution to the problem. The best way to identify the undue burdens on a Virginia consumer is to share my experience and Annabella's story with you. This is a fascinating story of animal abuse, consumer rights, a civil fraud trial, a criminal animal abuse trial, hiding behind an LLC, closing down a pet store, piercing the corporate veil, and the slow recovery of a precious little puppy. I hope it will change the way that companion animals are sold in Virginia. But until change is made, this documentary could assist you in exercising your rights as a Virginia consumer. But this is not legal advice. It's best to turn to an attorney whenever you're faced with this burden. First, let me introduce you to Annabella. This is a video I created when I started to see improvement and wanted to introduce her to my extended family at Christmas in 2019. The prior Christmas Eve, we added our first Boston Terrier, Gizmo, and wanted to get him a companion animal for Christmas. As you'll see, it was a match made in heaven. So let's meet Annabella. Annabella was born August 23, 2019. She was trafficked at 9 weeks and 3 days. From a breeder in Hominy, Oklahoma to Pinnacle Pets in Noesha, Missouri. Then she was sold and shipped to a pet store in Halifax County, Virginia. Annabella was advertised as healthy and up to date on shots, microchipped and AKC registered. We were under the impression she was homebred by the advert we found online. The seller met us midway to save us the full trip to purchase her. When the seller pulled the puppy out of the truck and we got our first look at her, we were in shock. She was a scrawny little thing with scratched and cloudy eyes, dirt crusted about her face, smelled of feces, and had dried blood on her swollen rectum and genitalia. She was having a hard time breathing and could barely hold her head up to look at us. Her tummy was extremely full, but the rest of her looked gaunt and wasting. She was very, very sick. Following our hearts, we purchased her, despite what our brains were screaming. At the point of sale, we learned that she was being sold by a pet store. We drove in silence for several miles. When we spoke, we knew we had done the right thing. We knew that this was the beginning of a long recovery that could have complications later. We immediately called our family veterinarian, and they asked us to bring her in immediately. Annabella's diagnosis was a being very thin, multiple corneal scars, difficulty breathing, a urinary tract infection, decreased GI motility, coccidia, upper respiratory infection, among other things. Annabella was actually 15 weeks old, not the 9 weeks advertised. Very small for her age. She only weighed 3 pounds, and she gained a half a pound in the first week. She was so starved for food in her short life that she is quick to eat her own poop. She is starting to realize there will always be another meal coming soon and is breaking that bad survival habit. She was just fur, skin, and bones a week ago, and she had very little muscle tone. The first 4 days she experienced pain when she pooped, and there was a lot of blood in her diarrhea. I wasn't sure if she was going to make it the first night, and I spent the night watching her labored breath and cleaning up her diarrhea. She was so hungry, but we were instructed not to feed her. X-rays found either shards of plastic or bones in her stomach, so night 1 was spent waiting for the poop. The next morning we returned to the clinic where she was given a few more tests and was placed on a drug regimen. When we got home, she had a good warm bath and we started meals every 3 hours, along with the meds. She received 13 treatments a day. Towards the end of day 3, Annabella was starting to get stronger and active in short bursts. The way she walks is so cute. And Gizmo absolutely adores her. Gizmo didn't know what to think at first. But after exchanging puppy pleasantries, they became the best of friends. Poor Annabella stayed moist for a few days. But it was definitely a match made in heaven. It's fun to watch them play together. A real sign she's getting better. Gizmo's so gentle with her. Annabella has filed a PETA complaint and a complaint with the Halifax Animal Control and has retained an attorney. So that's Annabella's Christmas story. A story of survival, a compassionate veterinarian, answered prayers, and finding her forever loving home. You're not alone if this video brought you to tears. I've seen it hundreds of times and it still moves me. I will never fathom the callous disregard of a helpless animal. Now before we move on, and to put you at ease about her condition, here's Annabella today. I can honestly say she's thriving. Yes, she still has some health issues, but this is the first month we seem to have a control of them. Annabella is 3 years old now and weighs in at 14 pounds. She is a ball of energy and I must say, the most loving little soul I've ever encountered. She is extremely smart and well behaved. Couple that with the chaos of 2 Boston Terriers in the house and you have a home full of love and endless entertainment. Now let's dive deep into the rabbit hole of consumer rights and the remedies granted the consumer in the Virginia Consumer Protection Act with respect to purchasing animals in Virginia. Let's go back to day one and experience the story as it really unfolded from my perspective, the consumer, the one caring for an abused animal with special needs. On December 2nd, 2019, using Google, I found a website called puppyfinder.com and located a 10-week-old Boston Terrier puppy, a little female, located in Halifax, Virginia. I was assured by the breeder that she was healthy, had papers, was microchipped, and up to date on all of her shots. The seller identified himself as Jim Ozoff and spoke about his home and location, which led me to believe that she was homebred. He suggested meeting us part way between Halifax and my home in Richmond, Virginia, and arranged the meeting for December 3rd, 2019 at 3 p.m. On December 3rd, 2019, Peter Lau and myself met with Jim at a gas station located at 350 Kings Highway, Keysville, Virginia. We purchased a little female Boston Terrier puppy for $1,100 cash, which we paid to the associate Jim Ozoff. We later found out that this was not his real name. By doing research on the phone number, we came up with the name Casey Annabella Jalil. We met and exchanged pleasantries, and then he opened the door to his truck and started searching the floor for the puppy. This was my first clue that something was wrong. What sort of breeder would drive a truck with a puppy that's not secured? When he turned around with the puppy, we were both in shock. Instead of the healthy little fat puppy we had seen online, we were handed a scrawny and sickly little pup. She had dried blood on her butt and obviously infected inflamed rectum and genitalia, a dirty little sad face crusted with filth and sores, both eyes extremely cloudy and appeared to be scratched, with the discharge oozing from each eye, and she had an overstuffed belly. She reacted as if she could barely hold her head up and look at us, and was having a difficult time breathing. The guy made up excuses for each concern we pointed out. Peter and I looked at each other, and without saying a word, we agreed to purchase her. Peter confirmed the price was $1,200, but I think the guy sensed that we were concerned and offered her for $1,100. I knew we had just purchased a puppy, but it felt like a rescue. At the point of sale, we were offered the very sick puppy and the contract that Peter Lau signed and entered into with Fur, Feathers, and Fins. Note, the seller, Jim, aka Casey Annabella Jalil, has a copy that Peter signed. We were given a copy and we had him sign it as a receipt of the purchase and the $1,100 payment. Annabella's family photos, her certificate of pedigree, feeding instructions, microchip registration, Annabella's medical record, the Virginia Consumer Protection Act. Now let's take a look at that contract again. Reading the contract and before signing it, I noticed I was purchasing this puppy from a pet store, Fur, Feathers, and Fins. This is the first time the pet store was identified in this transaction, and by me. We thought we were purchasing this puppy from a home breeder. As we drove back to Richmond, she grunted in discomfort laying in my arms. We decided then and there to call the veterinarian, Dr. Chelsea Mason, owner of West End Veterinary Clinic located in Short Pump, Virginia. They told us to bring her in as soon as we got back into town, and we did. After some tests, we learned her eyes were actually scratched, and one may have permanent ulcers as a result. She had blood on her stool swab, and x-rays revealed she had shards of either plastic or bones in her stomach. Dr. Mason was not sure if these would pass on their own, but we decided that wait and see if she could have a bowel movement on her own. So we went home with instruction not to feed her and to see if she would poop and bring it back in the morning. She did poop as soon as we got home. It was runny and had a lot of blood in it. While trying to clean it up, she kept trying to eat it. This is a true sign that she has been starved enough to start eating her own poop at some point in her short life. She pooped a couple more times that night with a lot of effort and bright blood each time. This is when we noticed that her belly had gone down in size, and now every bone in her body was visible to the naked eye. We figured he overfed her to hide the fact that she was malnourished and emaciated. The next morning, December 4th, 2019, I took her back to the clinic. She was so skinny. Dr. Mason ran tests on the stool sample I brought and discovered she had parasites that are usually only present under filthy conditions. In reviewing her paperwork, we found out she was 14 weeks and 4 days old, not 10 weeks. And that she had not had all of her shots and none since October. So we'll have to start those again once she gets better. In addition, the vaccine paperwork is from a veterinary clinic in Missouri. At 15 weeks, our other Boston Terrier weighed 14 pounds. Annabella only weighs in at 3 pounds. She was placed on 4 medications that resulted in 13 treatments a day. On the upside, she had an incredible appetite. We placed her on a 3-hour, 2-tablespoon feeding schedule. After tests performed on December 3rd and 4th, Annabella was diagnosed with being very thin, 3 pounds at 14 weeks, multiple corneal scars, difficulty breathing, urinary tract infection, decreased GI motility, coccidia, upper respiratory infection, and congenital defect of the tear production. On December 10, 2019, we took Annabella back to the vet for a follow-up. She gained half a pound, but still had parasites in her stool and some blood, a UTI. And we were informed that she could grow to become blind and will likely require expensive medicated drops for the rest of her life, twice a day. She was kept on antibiotic regimen and was placed on the eye gel medication twice a day. On December 11, 2019, in compliance with the contract we signed with the pet store and the Virginia Consumer Protection Act, we requested and received a certificate of unfit to purchase from licensed veterinarian Dr. Chelsea Mason. On December 11, 2019, I express mailed next day USPS to the pet store my demand letter for the reimbursement of medical expenses, Dr. Mason's certificate of unfit to purchase, and 3 medical bills totaling $687.94. On December 13th, said express mailing was delivered to Furs, Feathers, and Fins and signed for by Mr. Casey Abadella Jalil at 1:41 p.m. On December 23rd, 2019, the refund of $687.94 was never refunded to me by Fur, Feathers, and Fins. Furthermore, December 23rd, 2019 was the 10th day after the receipt of the veterinarian certification and deadline for the refund submission as required by the contract and the Virginia Consumer Protection Act. No payment has been received as of March 8, 2020. That was my case on March 8, 2020, and the law is black and white as presented to me, as required by law at the onset of the purchase, and again cited within the pet store's own contract. I followed the requirements of the statute impeccably and in good faith. After learning that Annabella's infections were likely the result of a filthy environment, I did research on Fur, Feathers, and Fins and found numerous complaints filed against them with PETA, Halifax Animal Control, and the Better Business Bureau. I filed a complaint with PETA, who never even acknowledged my complaint. They were completely useless when it came to the ethical treatment of Annabella. I had to call several times for weeks before speaking with anyone, and was told that they knew about the pet store, but they offered no intent to investigate the abuses obviously taking place there. They were absolutely useless to me. So I called Animal Control in Halifax and spoke with an Officer Moser. I explained the health of Annabella and the fact that I had an unfit to purchase statement from a veterinarian. The officer was useless to me. He stated that Halifax Animal Control deals with livestock, sheep, cows, horses, pigs, that he doesn't know anything about domestic pets, and that I should make my complaint with the state veterinarian's office. He made some general notes but would not take an official report, claiming it wouldn't do any good. They had been to the store many times. All they would do is go to the pet store and investigate, but that nothing would be done unless they found an animal dying or dead. I couldn't believe what he said. He went on to say, I have better luck calling Halifax Permits Division, that the building was such a dump that they'd have better luck closing them down than Animal Control would. That was the conclusion of Halifax Animal Control at the time. I also filed a complaint with the Virginia State Veterinarian. I never heard back from them. I also sent a letter to the state attorney's office about what was going on and accused Fur, Feathers, and Fins of animal abuse. On October 15, 2020, the Halifax Animal Control investigated Fur, Feathers, and Fins and confiscated several animals, including 2 exotic birds, an iguana, a ferret, and 4 puppies. I think it was a total of 8 animals. The animals were being treated for various infections at the Halifax County Animal Control Facility. At the time, I did not know about the particulars of the investigation or the case that the Senior Assistant Attorney General, Michelle Welch, brought against the pet store and its owners. Reason being that I was subpoenaed to appear at the state trial against Fur, Feathers, and Fins for the money spent by the state to nurse the animals back to health and for the boarding of the animals during the confiscated period. I was sequestered for the day, but the state attorney decided not to call me to testify for some reason. I was very disappointed, but assured that I would be called to testify in the criminal animal abuse case against Nija Abadella Jalil, the owner, and Fur, Feathers, and Fins of the confiscated animals and Annabella. The state won the case, and Nija was ordered to pay $5,366.70. He wouldn't pay until the state filed a show cause hearing. I think it was paid just before the hearing in cash. Since the conclusion of these trials, I have seen 2 news articles at sovonow.com that cover not one, but 2 cases regarding the confiscation of these animals. In an effort to maintain transparency, I want to read these articles to you. The headline reads, Pet Shop Allowed to Stay in Business, Animals Taken, October 29, 2020. Lawyers with the Virginia Attorney General's office traveled to Halifax for a nearly 7-hour hearing on Wednesday to argue, ultimately unsuccessfully, in favor of shutting down the Halifax pet store where 8 animals were surrendered to authorities in an October 15th inspection. General District Court Judge Calvin Spencer determined after a long day of testimony that an animal protection unit of the Attorney General's office, assisted by the Halifax County Animal Control, acted properly in taking away some ailing and poorly tended pets from fur, feathers, and fins located in Halifax. Most of the animals remain in state custody, although 2 dachshunds and a ferret deemed to be in reasonable health will be returned to the pet store. However, Spencer denied the state's request to ban the shop from selling pets. He rejected a separate motion to mandate monthly inspections. He also chided the AG's office at times for overreach. The court likes officers who are conservative, not by seizing all the animals. The filth was not so bad to seize those animals, said Spencer, who said he drew a distinction between animals living in dirty conditions and those that are being treated cruelly. Civil proceeding in General District Court came on the heels of an investigation by state and local animal control units, culminating in a mid-October visit to the pet store by authorities including county deputies and Town of Halifax and South Boston police. There were 8 animals taken by authorities from the property at that time, 2 parrots, an iguana, the ferret, and 4 puppies, described by the state as living in deplorable enclosed conditions. The defendants in the civil case were the pet store's owners, Naja Abdallah Jalil and brother Casey Abdallah Jalil. I will point out here that Casey Abdallah Jalil is not an owner of fur, feathers, and fins. The state was represented Wednesday by Commonwealth Senior Attorney General Michelle Welch, who worked in the Animal Law Unit. Welch summoned several veterinarians to the stand to describe the health conditions of the animals that were taken from the property. Representing the defendants, Halifax attorney John Greenbacker sought to poke holes in the state's case, challenging veterinarians on whether they had personally evaluated the animals or if they had noticed signs of abuse. The veterinarian who took in the puppies and ferret for treatment, Dr. Kay Gayer, with Cherry Stone Veterinary Clinic in Chatham, was quizzed by Greenbacker on what she observed in the animals. Did you see signs of abuse or neglect in the animals you treated? Greenbacker asked. No, replied Gayer. State investigators Amy Catherine Taylor was contacted by the Halifax County Animal Control to inspect the pet shop on October 15th. Upon conducting an initial walkthrough, she determined there was more evidence than anticipated, leading her to call for assistance and support. Halifax Animal Control Officer Catherine Martinet, South Boston Animal Control Officer Mark Naran, local police, and Dr. Brandon Mallard with the Halifax County Veterinary Center assisted with the inspection. The enclosure of the parrots, a Hans macaw and a blue-fronted parrot, were covered in cobwebs. The cages were dirty, there were no perches for the birds, food bowls were not clean, and their feathers were encrusted with dirty substance, testified Taylor. The macaw had a scissor beak, with the top beak crossed over the lower beak, instead of meeting in the middle. The blue-fronted parrot was housed at ground level, had severe feather loss, and discolored beak. The blue-fronted parrot stayed low and did not want to fly up, said Taylor. The 2 parrots and iguana were taken to Richmond to be treated by Dr. Ernesto Dominguez, a veterinarian who is qualified in the treatment of exotic animals. Dominguez testified that the macaw's beak deformation would cause it to have difficulty eating. he treated the beak with a Dremel tool, sanding the beak into a proper shape. As for the blue-fronted parrot, he was wheezing and has a respiratory condition that could be transmitted to other animals, said Dominguez. The ferret was reported to be lethargic, listless, and lying on a bed that was soaked through. The iguana was signed over to the state on the day of the walkthrough, was extremely thin, cold to touch, and the ridge on its back was folded over. Witnesses who also described finding live mites, and the reptile's skin was encrusted with a substance growing on its head. Martinet with Halifax County Animal Control testified 2 dachshund puppies taken from the shop had bloated pot bellies, nasal discharge, and were lethargic. A Yorkshire puppy was enclosed with the 2 dachshunds and showed the same unwell symptoms, along with feces matted on its fur of its back legs. The Maltese puppy was found in a wire cage in the back of the shop, enclosed with 2 other puppies. The Maltese was completely yellow with urine stains. Its hair was sticky and was smaller than normal, Martinet testified. After touring the facility with Taylor, I agreed to the seizures of the animals, she said, who then informed the shop owner of their plans. Martinet also spoke with the Commonwealth's attorney, Tracy Quackenbush Martin, who responded to the scene. Naja Abdallah Jalil was given the option of surrendering all of the animals or having them seized. He opted to surrender the iguana, said Martinet. The puppies and the ferret were delivered to Gayer in Chatham, who tested the puppies for worms. The test results on one of the dogs, the Maltese, came back positive for coccidia, a protozoa parasite that can cause severe diarrhea, dehydration, and in extreme cases, death. Due to one of the puppies having worms, we dewormed all of them, said Gayer. It's typical for puppies to get coccidian when they are being weaned, said Gayer. Also, the Yorkie was treated for a mild wheeze and ear mites. The ferret was not treated. The ferret showed no signs of neglect, said Gayer. After conceding to Greenbacker that she did not personally witness the neglect of the puppies, Welch interjected. Gayer did not see the overcrowded cages, but 2 other vets saw these animals in the filthy conditions, and she, Gayer, treated all of the puppies. Welch called on one more witness to the stand, Officer Ariel Hartman with Richmond State Parks. Hartman visited the pet shop on October 5th to purchase for a light bulb for her bearded dragon. I saw some babies, bearded dragons, to be dead, said Hartman, adding she was given a bowl to get them out of the cage. Hartman had seen other geckos that she believed needed to be rescued and returned a few days later to save them. I couldn't stop worrying about them. When I went back, I noticed their water bowls were full of sludge and the crickets were too large to eat, said Hartman. She saved one of the geckos, but the other died. After her second visit, Hartman posted on Facebook about the unclean conditions of Fur, Feathers, and Fins pet store. Countering the evidence put forward by the plaintiffs, Greenbacker pointed to the packing slips to show the dates the animals had arrived at the shop. In the case of the 2 dachshunds, they arrived a mere 2 days before the investigation. The puppies could have been sluggish and needed to recover from the trip, Naja Abdallah Jalil testified. As Casey Abdallah Jalil was on the stand, he was allowed by the court to show a video of the dachshund puppies playing in a lively fashion together. 2 volunteers at the pet store, siblings, Edward Harris and Tiffany Connor, also took the stand, testifying that they cleaned the pet store on a daily basis. The defense case seemed to make an impression on the judge. A video is worth 1,000 words, said Spencer, referring to the footage of playful and energetic puppies. Welch, with the AG's office, asked for a ban on the store, which the judge declined to grant, as well as a request for monthly inspections, also rejected by the judge. The state will be granted the opportunity to appeal the decisions made in this case. The second headline reads, Judge bars pet store owner from having pets, takes animals, March 30th, 2021. After a lengthy appeals hearing in a Halifax Circuit Court on March 15th, Circuit Judge Kimberly S. White reversed a lower court decision that largely favored the pet shop owner of Fur, Feathers, and Fins in the town of Halifax after ailing animals were taken from the local pet shop by local authorities in October. White issued an order of forfeiture, denying the pet shop's owner, Naja Abdel-Jalil, possession of 7 animals, 4 dogs, 2 exotic birds, and a ferret, and requiring him to pay $5,366.70 to Halifax County Animal Control for the animal's care. White further barred the defendant listed on the forfeiture ordered by his name and that of the pet shop from owning or possessing companion animals pursuant to state law. The Halifax pet shop is no longer open, according to Animal Control. White's order came after the Virginia Attorney General's office contested a prior ruling in the case by the General District Judge Calvin Spencer of Lunenburg County. Spencer presided over a 6-hour hearing in Halifax General District Court on October 27th to weigh the evidence against the pet shop, concluding that 3 of the animals seized during the inspection of the shop by Halifax County Animal Control should be returned to Abdel-Jalil. Spencer also rejected the state's request to shut down the pet shop. The Commonwealth was represented by Michelle Welch, Senior Assistant Attorney General and Director of the Animal Law Unit of the AG's office. Abdel-Jalil was represented by Halifax Attorney John Greenbacker. Greenbacker declined comment on White's ruling, but said his client will not appeal. Charlotte P. L. Gomer, Director of Communications for the Attorney General's office, said, essentially the whole case was retried and Michelle Welch won on all appeal requests. Gomer said the appeals hearing in the circuit court lasted 8 hours. During the proceeding, the court heard witness testimony and arguments by the counsel for the plaintiff and the defendant, resulting in the finding by White that all the animals taken in the inspection were deprived of adequate care and 2 animals, a Hans macaw and Phineas parrot, were cruelly treated. The parrot and macaw were taken during the inspection along with 2 male dachshunds, female Maltese, male Yorkie, and female ferret. The animals were kept by Animal Control pending the outcome of the case. Spencer, in the lower court ruling, ordered the Animal Control to return 3 of the pets that were seized during the October 15th operation to Abdel-Jalil. County Animal Control, assisted by local law enforcement, inspected the pet shop after fielding complaints from a local patron who cited the deplorable state of the enclosures there. In addition to the 7 animals taken that day, an iguana was seized and signed over to the state by the pet shop on the day of the walkthrough. The iguana was extremely thin, cold to touch, the ridge on the back was folded over, live mites were visible all over, and its skin was encrusted by a substance growing on his head, Animal Control reported. In addition to reimbursing the county for the animal's care, the pet shop was ordered by White to post an appeal bond in Shirley for Halifax County for $5,300. Earlier, I described the consumer case I had made. On March 8, 2020, I reached out to the law firm of Crumbian Consumer Legal Services, Incorporated of Richmond, Virginia, and retained attorney Jason M. Crumbian, Esquire, to represent Peter and I in the suit against Fur, Feathers, and Fins and Casey Abdel-Jalil, located in Halifax County, Virginia. On March 30, 2021, a case was filed in the Richmond General District Court, a civil case. After the defendants' failed attempts to change venue and to quash the case, the trial date was finally set for June 1, 2021. On June 1, 2021, when we arrived at court, we learned that the pet store intentionally misinformed us as to the real name of the person that actually sold us the puppy. They tried to have the case dismissed because we had identified and filed suit against Casey Abdel-Jalil, and the pet store Fur, Feathers, and Fins, when in reality, and revealed during testimony, that the man we pointed out in the courtroom, the person that sold us the puppy, was actually Nijah Abdullah Jalil, the brother of Casey, and the pet store owner. The case against Casey was dropped, but the case against the pet store moved forward. That's who we had the contract with. The fact that Nijah repeatedly lied about his identity, and the fact that we had dropped the case against the named individual that sold us the puppy would play a huge role in collecting on any judgments later in the story. The case lasted about 2 hours. Like I said, it was black and white. In the end, what aggravated the judge the most was all of the lying throughout the transaction. The puppy wasn't up to date on vaccinations, was not healthy, was deemed not fit to purchase, and was 14 weeks and 4 days old, not the 10 weeks advertised. Then there was a lying twice about his real name. We were suing for $25,000 in attorney's fees. And during the verdict, the judge wanted to award us the full amount we sought, but was reluctant to do so because we had not called our veterinarian as an expert witness to testify to the severity of Annabella's health issues. Anything she told me was considered hearsay. Even with all my medical records entered into evidence, he still wanted to hear from the veterinarian. In the end, we were awarded $16,625.83 and our attorney's fees of $5,580. It's important to understand that this lawsuit was specific to the transaction, whereas we purchased a puppy from Fur, Feathers, and Fins deemed unfit to purchase. This sort of suit does not contend with the criminal act of animal abuse, only that the animal or product was defective as defined by the Virginia Consumer Protection Act. After waiting a year for a payment from Fur, Feathers, and Fins, and knowing the criminal animal abuse trials for Nijah Abdullah Jalil was approaching, I decided to file a lien against the pet store property, which was actually owned by Nijah Abdullah Jalil personally, and not the asset of the pet store itself. On July 26, 2022, the lien was officially filed against Fur, Feathers, and Fins property owned by Nijah, located at 5264 Halifax Road, Halifax, Virginia, 24558. To my understanding, this is the extent the law will allow me to do in regard to securing a future payment of the judgment. It's my understanding that if I had known the real identity of Nijah Abdullah Jalil and had sued him personally, as I intended, as well as the store, then I would have had more options for collecting the judgment. But he lied about his identity from the very beginning. Although my contract with Jason Crumbian does not provide for collection efforts for the monetary judgments, on September 1st, 2022, I met with him to discuss filing a show cause motion, but it was explained to me that this motion cannot be used in civil cases to enforce payment of a monetary judgment. It was also explained that the lien I had placed on the pet store was fairly useless, being his assets are protected by the LLC. However, it was explained that if I could find out what bank he uses, that I do have the right to garnish the judgment with his bank. So I started looking for the bank he used for the pet store. It's important to remember that Nijah Abdullah Jalil closed the pet store LLC during the state attorney's animal abuse trial. The actual property is owned by Nijah, not the pet store, the property on which the lien was filed. The property next door to the pet store, which Nijah does not own, is being rented by him and is the location of a Bead Auto Sales LLC, which Nijah does own. Currently, Nijah is using the pet store property for a Bead Auto Sales as he has expanded his operation. He has 20 plus cars, SUVs, trucks, from very nice to sports cars and luxury models, but he refuses to pay me. It's an insult that he can change the purpose of the commercial property and avoid paying his debt to me by hiding behind an LLC sham. In doing my research, I gathered information on the pet store, the property where it was located, and the used auto dealership, and came across information on piercing the corporate veil. This changed my opinion on how I wanted to proceed with respect to being paid my judgments. We'll discuss this later. Let's step back a little bit and discuss another lawsuit representing Annabella against the owner of the pet store that was quietly making its way through the courts. On July 13, 2022, I was subpoenaed as a witness and drove 127 miles to Halifax County Courthouse to testify for the state of Virginia in the criminal animal abuse case brought by the state attorney's office. This case focused on the abuse suffered by the animals confiscated in the prior investigation and Annabella's abuse while in Naija Abadella Jalil, owner of Fur, Feather, and Fin's care prior to my purchasing her. On August 22nd and 23rd, 2022, I showed up for court and I was sequestered in a room alone, and I was called as a second to last witness on day 2 and the final day of the trial. The last witness was my veterinarian and expert witness, Chelsea Mason of West End Veterinary Clinic in Richmond, Virginia. Being next to last to testify and sequestered, I was again unable to learn of the particulars of the state's case. Later that day, on Annabella's 3rd birthday, and shortly after arriving home, I received a call from Senior Assistant Attorney General Michelle Welch. I will never forget her saying, "Annabella won her animal abuse case." I was completely surprised that the jury awarded her the first year's worth of medical bills for a total of $2,328.61. I was there to see Naija Abadella Jalil get jail time for his abuses he has inflicted on so many animals and Annabella. I didn't expect the monetary award. He was also found guilty for the abuse of 2 exotic birds and an iguana, but again, not for the other confiscated dogs, for some reason unknown to me, having been sequestered. Michelle Welch says the sentencing hearing will be October 14th, 2022, and that they are asking for 30 days jail time for each animal he was found guilty of abusing. So it looks like he could get 120 days. I hope so. That's what it'll take for someone like Naija Abadella Jalil to realize his crimes, for him to sit in a cage like his victims and think about that. At least he'll be treated humanely with a clean cage, water, food, exercise, and medical care should he need it. Let's be real. Yes, I could have passed up on purchasing Annabella, but I would have been complicit in her abuse if I hadn't purchased her away from Naija Abadella Jalil. I couldn't have lived a happy life knowing I'd turn my back on her. Hey everyone, this is William. I'm getting ready to hit the road on my way to Halifax County, Virginia, to go to Naija Abadella Jalil's sentencing hearing. So it's kind of a happy moment, and at the same time I feel really bad. There's really no winners any way you look at it, but at least he'll be paying for the crimes he's committed. Well, we're all loaded up and we're heading off to Halifax County, Virginia. Whoopee. Got our precious little cargos here. Babies. Wish us luck. Safe journey. Talk to you on the backside. Well, we're here at Halifax County Courthouse and we are awaiting the start of the sentencing trial for Naija Abadella Jalil in the case that the state brought against him for the abuse of animals. Incidentally, one of the cases was for Annabella, which he won back in August, on August 23rd. So we're waiting for the sentencing trial to begin, and we'll get back with you soon. Hello everyone, this is William Johnson. I'm speaking to you from the grounds of the Berry Hill Historic Resort and Conference Center here in Halifax County. This is where we're actually staying. They're having a wedding tomorrow, so there's preparations going on out front. So hopefully that noise will be down a little bit. I'm a little ways away from them so that we can discuss what happened today. Mixed feelings on today's results. There were 3 animals, to my understanding, that were being, that Naisha Abadella Jalil was being charged and sentenced today for the animal abuse of an iguana, a parrot, and Annabella, my Boston Terrier puppy. And was very disappointed in the judge's ruling today. Gosh, what a mess. With respect to the iguana and the parrot, the judge, even though the jury found Abadella Jalil guilty, the judge decided to suspend the sentence. There was a $2,500 fine that he suspended and a 30-day request from the state attorney's office for 30 days in jail for each offense. And the judge suspended them. So he's found guilty of the crime, but there's no accountability for this. In my case, the judge said, one of the comments he said was, I like puppies. He wasn't too crazy about ruling on an iguana and a parrot. For some reason, they have less of a companion aspect. It never ceases to amaze me how someone can just dismiss the value of life. To say one life isn't as valuable as another, that it's fine to abuse and neglect a life to the point of death simply because the observer has never experienced that sort of companionship. It shouldn't have to be said that iguanas and parrots are companion animals in the state of Virginia. But that puppies do have a wonderful companion asset to society. And he ruled that Abadella Jalil will have to spend 30 days in jail. He's allowing him to serve this sentence by doing it only on the weekends. So it looks like he'll be spending the next 15 weekends in jail. He was also ordered to pay me $1,000 for Annabella's medical bills, which is highly insufficient. I mean, I've spent $7,127 so far. And I paid $1,100 ransom to rescue her from this seller and owner of this pet store, Fur, Feathers, and Fins in Halifax County, Virginia, which has subsequently been closed down. It's my understanding that he's making a $100 profit on all of this. So it just really irritates me to no end. Irritates me. This shouldn't be happening to the consumer. And the criminal gets to profit from his crime. So for now, I'm going to leave that there. One thing that the judge said in making his ruling today and handing down his sentence, he said that Mr. Johnson and Mr. Lau had every opportunity to just walk away from this purchase and not purchase Annabella. Really? I had a civil case in Richmond, Virginia, and a judge ruled on the fraud issue. So this shouldn't have anything to do with my purchasing this puppy. This case was about animal abuse. What more can I say? It was about animal abuse, not about defrauding me. So I was dumbfounded for several minutes while the court kind of collected themselves, because everybody, I think, was in shock, including the defense. Then Naija Abdullah Jalil stood up and spoke to the judge. And I'm not going to go into detail right now about what he said. I will later when I can provide the transcript of the trial and kind of break that down a little bit more so you see how these criminals get away with their crimes. But in essence, he spent a lot of time whimpering, crying, complaining about, I had so many animals and was having a hard time taking care of all of them, and how am I supposed to take care of one that's sick when the other ones need attention too? And dude, this is your business. This is your business. If you can't handle it, get out of the business and stop letting animals suffer from your inadequacy. I am so angry at this judge. This was not a fraud trial. This was an animal abuse trial. So, I'm very upset. I'm grateful about the $1,000, if I'll ever see it. But this is not about the money. It never has been about the money with me. It's about the animal, the abuse it suffered, and the consumers that suffer from his predatory practices. It's also come to my attention that he's not stopped selling animals. He is still selling pets. And he's being investigated for that because another court said he wasn't allowed to sell, have, possess, care for, transport, or even have an animal on his property that's a companion animal as defined by the state. But he's evidently still doing this. As of today, I now have 2 courts that have rendered verdicts and judgments against Naija Abdullah Jalil and Fur, Feathers, and Fins for defrauding me and for abusing the animal, which resulted in the fraud. So now I've got 2 nails in this proverbial coffin, and I am out to pierce his corporate veil. It's not about the money. I can't make that clear enough. But to Abdullah Jalil, it is all about the money. He is in this to win it. He is in it to make money. He is in it to rip off anyone that gets in his way. That's what it boils down to. This guy is pathetic. So My next step is to continue moving forward on piercing the corporate veil. I'm going to go back up to the hotel here and have me another Heineken. Love my Heineken. Not big drinker, but today I'm celebrating. And licking wounds, but it's always better with beer. So I will see y'all soon. So that's my recap of what's happened on this sentencing day for Naija Abdullah Jalil. Mixed bag of feelings. I'm happy he's going to do some time for Annabella's crime. I'm happy he's been ordered to pay me $1,000 of the $7,200 that I've spent on medical bills for her. I'm sad that all of the work that Michelle Welch and Halifax Animal Control didn't result in jail time for the suffering of those animals that they rescued and that they nursed back to health. They are truly guardians of those that can't guard themselves. So my heart goes out to them for those losses. But I want them to understand you're not a loser. You won something very important today. You've made it clear to everyone else out there that this will not be tolerated in the state of Virginia. And if it happens, we're going to come after you. We're going to prosecute you. And we're going to put you in jail. And if it doesn't happen the first time, we'll do it on appeal. This has to stop. Now let's take a deeper look at Annabella's recovery and what was required for her care. The pics I'm sharing are in chronological order. You'll notice how she improves, gets worse, gets better, then gets worse, back and forth as her treatment and diet changed. Around 3 months into Annabella's medical treatments and some recovery, she started losing her hair. She also started getting a rash on her body within minutes of eating. With veterinary oversight, we started a long, expensive search for a food that would be beneficial to her and stop the rashes and hair loss. After trying several prescription diets, on December 31st, 2020, Chelsea Mason, her veterinarian, decided to run a battery of allergy tests to find out what was breaking her out. There were a few things she was allergic to, but nothing she had been in contact with, except for one critical element: protein. Not just some, but all proteins, animal, plant, and synthetic. In January 2021, Chelsea Mason referred me to the Virginia-Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine for the purpose of creating a diet she could ingest without an allergic reaction. They provided a recipe for a home-cooked meal of scrambled eggs, steamed rice, green beans, and carrots. There was also omega-3 oil that was added and a supplement called Balanced Tea. This was to be fed to her 3 times a day. For nutritional values, I could only prepare 3 days of food at a time. The diet did work better than anything else we had tried, but she was still breaking out in a rash. But her hair did try to grow back in. She was on the diet for 3 months. In March 2021, Chelsea Mason referred Annabella to Lynn Schmitzel, DMD, with the Virginia Veterinary Center's Emergency and Specialty, specializing in dermatology. More extensive testing was done, and a skin treatment was started. After weeks of treatment, there was no real improvement. Then they suggested to Chelsea that we try to feed her Royal Canine's prescription Ultimino dry food, a non-protein kibble. She liked the food, and the reaction was just a slight pickiness to parts of her skin, not all over, and only lasted 15 minutes after eating compared to hours. She remained on this food until the COVID-19 supply chain disruptions started hitting Royal Canine. The food line was shut down and the hoarding began. The last place I found it for sale was on Amazon for $395 for a bag, normally $69 for 8.8 pounds. So I had to revert back to making the home-cooked meals, which had protein from the eggs. The rash returned with a vengeance. Chelsea explained that she had exhausted her ability to help Annabella with the continuing issues. A few days before June 23rd, 2021, I had to call a mobile vet I use to care for my cats. It's less traumatic for them to be treated at home. After the cat was tended to, Annabella came bouncing into the room to meet the vet. The veterinarian, Aaron Dexter Bukema, DMV, owner of Capital Home Veterinary Care, picked her up and loved on her and made a comment about her rash. She also had a Boston Terrier she rescued that had the same deep dermatitis that Annabella has and suggested an injectable medication called Cytopoint. She seemed confident that she could help Annabella, so we set up an appointment. On June 23rd, 2021, Annabella was checked out thoroughly, and we started a regimen of drugs for several persisting issues and was started on Cytopoint injections. Annabella has had 9 appointments with Dr. Aaron Dexter Bukema since that day, and she continues to improve, but hasn't completely beat the rash issue. But she's closer than she's ever been. She's back on Ultimino food, and that seems to also be helping. It bears expressing that it is a proven fact that poor care, filthy cages, neglected immunizations, and poor exercise and diet during a puppy's development stages can cause various allergies later in life. But thankfully, the same study claims that once a dog becomes healthy, they often outgrow their allergies. So we still have hope. She now weighs 14 pounds and is a very happy puppy, despite all she's been through. Her eyes have also cleared up, and she no longer needs the eye gel. But we understand that as she gets older, she will likely need that again and could possibly suffer from some blindness from the ulcers on her cornea, from the scratches she suffered in Nija's care. Oh boy, now let's have some fun with the court of public opinion and the self-serving judgments of one group in particular on Facebook, aka Meta. These judgeroos in kangaroo court call themselves Virginia Animal Owners Alliance and claim their function is promoting and preserving animal ownership statewide. The About Us statement on their website reads, "The members of the VAOA are animal owners from across Virginia. We came together because we love our animals and value our way of life. We own traditional pets, farm animals, and even zoo animals. We believe in the positive work animal owners are doing throughout the state. We want to encourage their efforts and nurture an environment for future owners who are ready to learn. We hope to inspire the next generation to make animals a part of their lives." But in reality, they are nothing more than a group of people that attack the work of the dedicated Virginians that are actually boots on the ground, butts in the witness stand, animal and pet owner rights defenders. You know the type, those self-righteous animal lovers that think they know more about animals than God himself. The type of people that post lies about animals so you'll click on their ad and increase their own notoriety to promote their own agenda. So let's take a few minutes to address the VAOA about the burden that this group inflicts on the real victims of fraud and abuse, and expose them for what they are with their own posts and words. First, let me tell VAOA that if you want the truth about your animal savior, Naja Abdullah Jalil, you should watch this entire documentary. Since you're acting like a jury and passing judgment, here's some facts for your kangaroo court to deliberate. Naja's attorney tried to convince the jury that Annabella was sick when he took possession of her. I guess he's now finally admitting he sold a sick puppy. My expert witness testified to the fact that part of her health problems had an incubation period, which placed the blame on her condition directly on Naja, being that the incubation period occurred while Annabella was in his possession and not before. During what VAOA describes as a raid, inspectors also found illegally obtained prescription drugs on the premises, drugs that would have helped Annabella with part of her suffering. But Naja decided not to treat her or seek treatment for her. Furthermore, Naja neglected to provide her the vaccinations she was due, but advertised to the world that he had done so. This is what VAOA posted about me for the world to see on Facebook, aka Meta, Google, and Yahoo, the World Wide Web in general. Annabella's owner testified he bought her from Naja to rescue her. Under cross-examination, he admitted there was a second puppy, but he decided not to choose it because it was a male. Does this sound like a rescue to you? Wow. Yes, I did purchase her to rescue her. But you neglect to tell your followers that I wanted a black and white female. I wanted the dog that I found online in Naja's false advertisement, the puppy we spoke about on the phone, and that I was promised. I did not want a male puppy. I had one. I did not want a brindle Boston Terrier, which the male was. I wanted a black and white female Boston Terrier. It is not VAOA's place, or anyone else for that matter, to dictate what animal I choose to add to my family. Furthermore, I did not admit to the second puppy under cross. I actually brought the puppy up voluntarily on direct. It was not coaxed out of me by his attorney. The male puppy was not as distressed as the female, who needed immediate and emergency care. If I had had the $2,400, I most certainly would have purchased both of them to rescue them from Naja. VAOA claims to be all about the owners of animals, their rights, and educating owners and future owners. But they don't seem to be concerned about the animals' rights, but only with the owner's rights. So let me make this extremely clear to you, VAOA. Naja Abdullah Jalil is a seller of animals, not an owner, and now a jury-convicted animal abuser. Animals are no more than a product and money and profit to him, or at least that's the way he behaves. I am the animal owner. You are standing with the criminal when you should be standing with the victim, Annabella, and me, the consumer that Naja defrauded. The post is disgusting and sickens me, as it should all of your members. But you don't stop there, then you post this. This attack ad reads, Boston Terriers are prone to a variety of health problems. Just ask a vet or the folks with pet insurance. Naja received jail time for selling a puppy that ended up with digestive issues, allergies, and corneal scarring. How does this equate to malicious intent and criminal charges? Hashtag, we stand with Naja. Hashtag, something stinks in Halifax. Again, you're misleading the jury, VAOA. The truth and the whole truth is out there in the transcripts of not just one trial, but 2 trials between myself and Naja. But you obviously don't care about reporting the truth. Naja received jail time for neglecting Annabella, as her veterinarian testified to. He received jail time because of the conditions he kept her in were filthy and deplorable, which caused her health issues, as my veterinarian testified to. Annabella did not just end up with digestive issues, allergies, corneal scarring after I purchased her. Nigel's malicious neglect caused this, the charges, and his conviction. It is also a proven fact that the neglect of vaccinations, proper nutrition, clean water, exercise, and clean environment during a puppy's development can cause the diagnosis Annabella received on her unfit to purchase statement that was presented to the courts. But you, VAOA, don't want to mention that in your attack ads. Again, VAOA is standing with a convicted animal abuser. What stinks is VAOA passing judgment on a case they obviously know nothing about or are outright lying about. A crime that 9 jurors found Nigel guilty of, based on the facts and science. Not the assistant state attorney, not Halifax Animal Control, and not the judge, but 9 jurors. VAOA acts so holier than thou and seems to know all about this case. How do you explain away the fact that Annabella was bleeding from her rectum and genitalia when I picked her up the first time I saw her? Had sores, not a rash, all over her face and body, and infected oozing scratches on her eyes. Explain that. You can't. You weren't there. You don't know the facts. But her veterinarian does, and it's science. Get your facts straight before you taking it to the jury of public opinion. VAOA should issue a public apology to Annabella and myself for the disinformation, propaganda, and slander they are spreading with these disgusting ads. Stop twisting the facts and Annabella's justice to fit your organization's narrative. You really disgust me and have no place in our society. And maybe you should use real pictures from the case in your attack ads. They are public record. What a novel idea. Here you go. This is Annabella just before delivery to Nigel. She weighed 2.6 pounds and was 9 weeks and 3 days old. This is Annabella after 5 weeks in Nigel's care. She only weighed 3 pounds and was 14 weeks and 4 days old. You can see every bone in her emaciated body. How odd that she gained a half a pound the first week with me. No, you don't want to share the facts. You rather post lies as clickbait. Here's another attack ad posted by VAOA. It reads, a novice animal owner asked Nigel Abdeljalil to take his sick iguana. Animal control officers raided Nigel's pet store after receiving a complaint. Nigel explained the background of the iguana to the officers and signed it over to them with a notation of its history. He was criminally charged by the Commonwealth and convicted of animal cruelty. Why is compassion a liability? Hashtag, we stand with Nigel. Hashtag, no double standard. Oh my God. Are you serious? Are you actually painting him as a savior? He's not. Nigel expected to make money selling this iguana. That's why it was in his pet store. If he is such a great guy, why didn't he seek care for the sick animal, or at least treat it humanely with a clean cage and clean water? It's not the compassion that's the liability. It's the malicious neglect. Compassion is defined as sympathetic pity and concern for sufferings or misfortunes of others. Halifax Animal Control found in their investigation, not a raid, that the iguana was extremely thin, cold to touch, the ridge on the back was folded over, live mites were visible all over, and its skin was encrusted by a substance growing on its head. Yeah, he's a real humanitarian. And here's another attack ad that the VAOA posted on Facebook, aka Meta. It reads, when Nigel's pet store was raided in Halifax, Virginia, authorities seized a young ferret that they claimed was too thin. Nigel was charged by the Commonwealth for animal cruelty. However, One of the vets for the Commonwealth testified on the stand that the animal was not thin when it was brought to her after the seizure. Nija's attorney made a motion to strike the counts, and the judge granted the motion in regards to the ferret. How can citizens trust the word of local animal control or members of the animal law unit? Hashtag, we stand with Nija. Yes, it's true. Veterinarian Dr. Kay Gayer with Cherry Stone Veterinary Clinic in Chatham, Virginia, testified that she examined but did not treat the ferret, stating the ferret did not show signs of neglect. However, Assistant State Attorney Michelle Welch interjected and stated that Gayer did not see the overcrowded cages, but two other vets saw these animals in their filthy conditions. Gayer was not present. Inspectors testified that the ferret was lethargic, listless, lying on a bed that was soaked through. You, VAOA, ask, how can citizens trust the word of local animal control or members of the animal law unit? Answer, they are the first line of defense for animals in crisis. They are the animals' first responders. You have to trust their word and allow the justice system process to work towards the right end. I ask, how can you, VAOA, trust the word of a convicted animal abuser over the facts, science, and testimony of licensed veterinarians and experts? And how can you attack animals' first responders and pursuers of justice for animals with such frivolous drivel and half-truths in your reporting? VAOA also posted this attack ad on Facebook, aka Meta. It reads, Casey Abadella Jalil bought a Hans macaw online. When his girlfriend brought it home, he realized it had a crossed beak. He contacted avian vets to set up an appointment to have it trimmed and kept the bird at his brother's pet store. Animal control raided the store and took the bird from him. The state charged Casey with animal cruelty because of the bird's defect. Casey won his case, but his bird was never returned. Casey is the brother of Nija Abadella Jalil, who stated that he was the manager of Fur, Feathers, and Fins in Halifax, Virginia. You claim in your attack ad that he contacted avian vets to set up an appointment to have the bird's beak trimmed. If this is true, how come it still had a scissor beak when the pet store was investigated? Did he actually make an appointment? Did he keep it and have the beak trimmed? The enclosures of the parrots, a Hans macaw and blue-fronted parrot, were covered in cobwebs and cage was dirty. There were no perches for the birds, food bowls were not clean, and their feathers were encrusted with dirty substance, testified State Investigator Amy Catherine Taylor. She continued, the macaw had a scissor beak with the top beak crossed over the lower beak instead of meeting in the middle. The two parrots were taken to Richmond to be treated by Dr. Ernesto Dominguez, a veterinarian who is qualified in the treatment of exotic animals. Dominguez testified that the macaw's beak deformation would cause it to have difficulty eating. He treated the beak with a Dremel tool, sanding the beak in proper shape. As for the blue-fronted parrot, he was wheezing and has a respiratory condition that could be transmitted to other animals, said Dominguez. Casey was not charged with animal cruelty because of the bird's defect. He was charged because of the conditions the bird was forced to live in and for not having the so-called defect corrected. For the same reasons, the bird was not returned to him, and the state was awarded custody by the judge. It bears mentioning that state code is clear as to the environment that Casey must provide the bird. He was nowhere close to meeting those regulations. He was just lucky that Judge Spencer drew a distinction between animals living in dirty conditions and those that are being treated cruelly. Again, this is just another example of VAOA's reporting half-truths and propaganda to fit its own agenda. Here's two more attack ads VAOA posted. The first one reads, "Why Halifax County Animal Control and Virginia's Animal Law Unit don't want you to know." This puppy was seized in Halifax, Virginia, with the claim it needed emergency vet care. However, the pup was found to be healthy by a licensed vet during an exam the same day. The puppy was awarded back to its owner but was never returned. It had died of electrocution while in the care of animal control. Michelle Welch of the Animal Law Unit filed a motion to suppress the facts about this puppy. Hashtag, we stand with Nyjah. Hashtag, no double standard. The second one reads, Laura Medkiff has been awarded Animal Control Officer of the Year. Nyjah's puppy was kept in her home after the raid of the pet store and died of electrocution on her watch. These facts were suppressed from the jury, and she has not been charged. What made the difference? Hashtag, we stand with Nyjah. Hashtag, no double standard. Let me tell you what Virginia Animal Owners Association doesn't want you to know. Okay, let me be clear here. I'm not condoning VAOA's attack ads about the loss of this precious little puppy. It's a tragedy. And yes, I'm sure it could have been avoided, but it was not intentional. It was instant, but not intentional and imminent. Unlike the filthy conditions it was forced to live in by Nyjah and Fur, Feathers, and Fins pet store, and the imminent health issues that would have resulted from that fact. During the trial, Greenbacker, Nyjah's attorney, pointed to the packing slips to show the dates that the animals had arrived at the shop. In the case of the two dachshunds, they arrived a mere 2 days before the investigation. The puppies could have been sluggish and needed to recover from the trip, Nyjah Abdallah Jalil testified. I agree with Nyjah's statement. However, I have to side with Halifax Animal Control on the removal of the puppies and for several reasons. I personally know of 2 other pet owners that purchased puppies from Nyjah around the time I purchased Annabella. And like Annabella, these 2 puppies also had coccidia when they were purchased. Geyer testified it is typical for puppies to get coccidian when they are being weaned. So I asked other veterinarians about that claim. The conclusion was that this is true, but only by association with eating feces or being kept within proximity of infected feces and the soil or the surface it is in contact with. BCA Animal Hospital's website states, your dog most likely became infected with coccidia from swallowing osis, immature coccidia, that are found in dogs' feces and soil contaminated with feces. Infected dogs pass osis and feces, which are very resistant to a wide variety of environmental conditions and can survive some time on the ground. Coccidia can manifest in as little as 6 hours, but it usually takes 7 to 10 days. This would hold true for a cage, and the fact that Annabella was quick to eat her own feces when I purchased her, which I want to point out as a sign of having been starved, further inclines me to side with Halifax Animal Control in removing the puppies. Halifax Animal Control Officer Martinet testified the 2 dachshund puppies taken from the shop had bloated potbellies, nasal discharge, and were lethargic. A Yorkshire puppy was enclosed with the 2 dachshunds and showed the same unwell symptoms, along with feces matted in the fur on the back of its legs. The Maltese puppy was found in a wire cage in the back of the shop, enclosed with 2 other puppies. The Maltese was completely yellow with urine stains. Its hair was sticky and was smaller than normal, Martinet testified. Oh yeah, Animal Control did the right thing removing all of the puppies, and if for no other reason than to perform a wellness examination. Geyer also testified she tested the puppies for worms. The test results on one of the dogs, the Maltese, came back positive for coccidia, a protozoa parasite that can cause severe diarrhea, dehydration, and in extreme cases, death. Due to one of the puppies having worms, we dewormed all of them and treated the Yorkie for a mild wheeze and ear mites, said Geyer. However, Assistant State Attorney Michelle Welch interjected and stated that Geyer did not see the overcrowded cages, but 2 other vets saw these animals in the filthy conditions. Geyer was not present. VAOA is very comfortable with attacking Halifax Animal Control, and the Animal Law Unit of the State Attorney's Office, and the Virginia Assistant Attorney General, Michelle Welch. But they are silent about the faults of Nyjah and condition of his enclosures that resulted in the seizures of the animals at Fur, Feathers, and Fins in Halifax, Virginia. As for the electrocution of the precious little puppy, it was an accident, not an execution. VAOA asks what's the difference? It's my opinion that this could have been avoided, and that the person in charge of its care, Animal Control Officer Laura Midkiff, didn't intentionally put the puppy in harm's way, as for VAOA would like the public to believe. We all make mistakes as animal parents. Dogs escape fencing, they slip out of collars, and sometimes run out of the house into traffic and get hit by cars. Would you have these pet owners arrested and charged? Midkiff made a parenting mistake, but Nyjah intentionally broke the law. As for suppressing the facts of this incident for the jury, it was the right thing to do. The case before them was for the criminal animal cruelty that Nyjah Abdullah Jalil subjected 8 animals and Annabella to while in his care. The incident had no bearing on the prosecution's case against Nyjah and could not have served as any rational defense of the charges leveled against him. Period. If Nyjah had done the right thing in the first place, the puppy would have never been seized. And there are several more ads of half-truths and disinformation that the Virginia Animal Owners Alliance have posted online about this case. But we've given their propaganda enough screen time. The only reason I have shared what I have is to expose yet another example of the undue burden that's placed on the consumer when victimized or defrauded by a seller of animals. On the topic of public opinion, I'll leave you with this final thought. We can judge the heart of a man by his treatment of animals. Well, I hope you enjoyed the burden and learned a little more about what's going on in the puppy market, or picked up some pointers if you plan to purchase a puppy, or have fallen victim to the practice. I'm still pursuing the $16,000 civil judgment against Nyjah Abdullah Jalil by piercing his corporate veil. Again, it's not about the money. Money just happens to be the adjudicated punishment. I'd rather have lawyers get it all than to let him keep his ill-gotten gains. So I will follow up with a part 2 of the burden once the case and payment is resolved. Meanwhile, give the burden a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for fun and uplifting videos from Gizmo and Bella's World. I'd like to express my appreciation for prayers and help from all of the wonderful defenders of animals. Thank you all. First, I want to thank Chelsea Mason and all of her wonderful staff at West End Veterinary Clinic, not only for her excellent care of Annabella, but also for her expert testimony in her animal abuse case. I also want to thank Dr. Bukima and her wonderful staff at Capitol Home Vet Care for all the extra care they gave to Annabella to get her back on the path of wellness. And of course, I have to thank our attorney, Jason Crumbian, for taking our civil case and winning the judgment against Nyjah Abdullah Jalil's pet store, Fur, Feathers, and Fins in Halifax, Virginia. I also want to thank Catherine Martinez with Halifax Animal Control. She's an angel among angels at Halifax Animal Control. They are the first responders for so many animals in crisis. Thank you all for what you do. And speaking of angels, I can't even begin to thank Michelle Welch, the Senior Assistant Attorney General and Director of the Animal Law Unit of the Virginia Attorney General's Office. I've had but a glimpse of the world she marches through in pursuit of justice for abused and neglected animals in the state of Virginia, and it's a horrific, dark place. She and her staff are real heroes. Thank you for all each of you do